Morning, Branson. How are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself, sir?
Not so bad. No complaints. You have a good weekend?
Yes, sir. Can't complain. A little
Good.
cold, but
But that's winter, right?
yeah, yeah.
All right. Let's see here.
Do you think they're going to do the consumption tax?
I don't know. Anything's possible with crazy politics these days. I really have no insight on that. What do you think?
I think they are because they're saying small and corporate businesses won't pay any more taxes,
Yeah.
and, but you'll get a 23 tax on their percent tax on everything else. So if you work the system right, you can skirt through and do the Donald Trump 750 for 5 years, I guess.
Well, I mean, the if you're heavily invested in assets like real estate, I mean, the way the tax laws are set up, there's a lot of tax benefits for owning real estate. And that guy, has a lot of real estate. However he got it or hook or by crook, the fact is, that generates a lot of tax things. And I've known a lot of real estate people. They rarely pay tax, but they also at the same time, they're also investing insane amount of money in buildings and stuff like that. So it's not free money. It's just really a discount for investing in asset classes that are favored by the government, is the way I see it.
Mm.
And there are other examples. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with something called carried interest. Have you ever heard of that term?
I've heard it, but I don't know what it means.
Carried interest means that if you're a venture capital or private equity firm and you invest in deals, that you have a percentage interest in that entity, and that carried interest is transferable between entities. So if you have 10 companies that you have funded, you have 10 opportunities to transfer that carried interest to other opportunities. So what ends up happening over time, the real sophisticated ones, they essentially never pay tax on companies that they invest in and sell. It's essentially how it works. And if you look at the complications on discussions about taxes over the last really the last 5 years, what you'll see if you read the details, it'll say the carried interest provision survives this time again. So it's a favorite of Wall Street and investment groups. Consumers have no awareness of it or understanding of it, but it's a much bigger tax break than tax deductions for real estate. Because, for example, a deduction is not the same as a credit. If you get a deduction for money that you spent, what you're doing is getting a discount on that money you spent. It's not eliminating the money you spent. Whereas carried interest is actually completely untaxable gains. And in some cases, the gains are unbelievably high gains. If you happen to invest in Facebook when they first came out, you've gone from something worth $1 million to something worth almost $1 trillion, and not a penny of tax paid by those investors. And most people don't realize that. That's the real loophole, much more so than real estate deductions and all that stuff are really an old-fashioned construct from the 70s and the 80s, when there was I don't know if you remember, there used to be a lot of tax shelters that people would promote. And the tax shelters almost always were, like someone would lease a big space to Kmart or Sears, and that underlying building would become a tax shelter for investors because of all the tax benefits for investing in real estate. That's really declined quite a bit in the last 20 years. That whole concept, you never see tax shelters like that anymore. You never see that sort of investment. Now all the investments are investing in startups, investing in new ways of doing things. So it's a completely different business model than the old tax shelters we used to talk about so much. So carried interest, if you look that up and learn about it, you'll be amazed at the size of that loophole, how that works. And every single, whether it's Republican, Democrat, whoever the president is, somebody always tries to go after carried interest, and they lose every single time. It's never been dealt with by anybody. It's just, just hasn't happened. So, hey, everybody, morning. All right. So today we're going to talk about something you might be familiar with, or it might be very weird to you. I'm not quite sure how it will affect you. But it's something called newsjacking. See if I can, there we go. Hold on a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn about newsjacking, and then I'm going to walk you through a couple of slides after this short interview with the guy who invented the concept. But I think you'll have a pretty clear understanding of what it is and how you can use it. And one of the great things is it's free. So it's a free thing you can do depending on how you go about it. But hopefully you'll find it helpful for growing your business. Everybody see that, I assume? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Everyone, super excited, super honored to have David Meerman Scott with us today. I have followed him for years. He doesn't even know this, but when I first started this about 7 years ago, I sped through your books and just learned so much. And for people who are just watching this for the first time, I'm a do-it-yourself PR strategist. So I teach people how to get in the media. And right now, with everything going on, the term newsjacking is what we use, and you actually coined that phrase. So welcome, and
thank you.
Let's talk some newsjacking.
It's awesome to be here. I do need to clarify that the word newsjacking was actually used in the 1970s in the UK to reference essentially hooligans that stole newspapers from in front of newsstands and then sold them. So the word existed. I just started using it for what it means now, which is understanding the news cycle. Every news story breaks in a typical bell-shaped curve. And when you understand that news cycle and you have a particular expertise and reporters and editors are looking for your expertise, that's your moment to jump in there.
Right. So knowing what's going on, and obviously right now, COVID-19 that's
huge.
Really 95% of the news.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, you and I have been doing public relations. I mean, I've been doing it for 30 years in one way or another. I've never seen anything like this where you go on, I was just on, and I can't keep away. I don't know about you. I just can't keep away. I was on the New York Times site about an hour ago. I was on the Washington Post site about 45 minutes ago. I go to Google News a couple times a day, and the top 20 stories are COVID-19. Everything else is off the page.
Yeah. But the good news is most of us have an expertise that we can provide value to. Everybody's scared, and I think it's more fear of the unknown than anything. We just don't know what's around the corner. But if you have an expertise that you can share, now is the time to jump on this. And I mentioned to you, I'm getting emails constantly from my clients who are, HR people, real estate people, because the real estate market's really not being impacted. Health and wellness, like there's such an opportunity. And again, not to sell right now, not to gouge anybody, but
no, not at all.
Provide value, give people relief and knowledge and things that can help them.
What's interesting about this is, and this is sort of the reason why this is such a big opportunity, is that normally when mere mortals like us are trying to get attention in the news, we have to convince a reporter or an editor that we have something interesting to say to work into their story. What's happening now that's so different, and it doesn't happen very often, is that the reporters and editors need us. They absolutely need us in their stories, and they are looking, they're searching frantically for people to quote in their stories. They're looking for alternative angles on the story. A friend of mine, I don't know if you know who Vern Harnish is, but he just got a whole bunch of press because he writes and speaks about how companies scale up. And he just got a bunch of press because he talks about how companies are trying to keep the employees that they have on the payroll, even though it's difficult. And in some cases turn them from full-time employees to part-time freelancers, but to keep them on the payroll. And that's an important story. And there's so many stories like that. As you said, there's real estate and wellness and all of the different things that you said. And there's always a reporter looking for somebody to quote. So instead of us trying to pitch reporters on our time, which is normally what happens, what's happening now is we are getting in front of them on their time. It's a really big difference.
It is, and that's why I think what's really important too is content right now. Yeah. Get your content out there, because the journalists are going to find you. They're, like you said, they're looking for experts in certain fields. They're coming up with their ideas of, you know, and we learn new things every day. Yes. About what's going on. So they need to write stories about that or do interviews about that. And knowing what that is and pushing content out. I think I told you when we spoke yesterday, I've been just doing nonstop videos. Like we're just constant. Yes. Because there's such a need for it.
Yes, I have too. I've also participated in a number of virtual events. I do about 30 or 40 paid speeches a year all over the world. And of course, they're all canceled for a 3-month period. And who knows, maybe longer. And a bunch of events have now gone to virtual. But you're right. There's multiple ways that we can get our ideas out there into the marketplace. The first thing to recognize, however, is that reporters are searching for us. Reporters are searching for experts. So it's a good idea for us to be in front of them in the way that they're searching. So I'm a big fan of writing blog posts that have something to do with your area of expertise around a particular news story, in this case, COVID-19. I did a blog post a couple of days ago talking about what business people can do to improve their marketing while they're sidelined with this crisis and they have time on their hands. Here are a few things that people can do to improve their marketing, you know, when they're sitting at home twiddling their thumbs, as an example. And then if a reporter or editor out there is, oh my gosh, what can people do during COVID-19 to improve their marketing? They do a search, perhaps they'll find me. The other thing which I know that you do and that you talk about is using Twitter, because every reporter is on Twitter. Every reporter uses Twitter as a tool to find sources. And so if you use Twitter yourself to do a couple of things that come to mind, the first thing, and I know that you teach these ideas, so I'm not telling you anything, but the first thing is that you create a piece of content somewhere else, a video, a blog post, a piece of content on your website, share it on Twitter, but use the appropriate hashtags. So in this case, COVID-19 is a hashtag that's trending. And then you could do several different hashtags that the reporter can triangulate. So hashtag COVID-19, hashtag wellness, or hashtag COVID-19, hashtag real estate. And then if a reporter is searching on those two hashtags because they're doing a story and you happen to use those two hashtags, bingo, your tweet pops up. And then if you're pointing to something in that tweet a video or a blog post or a piece of content on your website, and the reporter finds it, sometimes they'll even quote you without contacting you, which is incredible, right?
That's where those Google alerts come in. I always tell
Yeah.
people, make sure you Google yourself and see. So what would be your number one tip for people right now? You're sitting at home, you can help people, you have this expertise. Do you recommend Twitter, maybe even tagging a journalist on something?
Well, that's another way that you can use Twitter. So the first way is create a piece of content, and it has to be value added. It has to be valuable. I always tell people the best way: create the content to reach your audience, but then have in the back of your mind that it might be found by a journalist. So in other words, always add that, always be valuable. And if anyone wants to check me out on Twitter, I am DM Scott, that's DMSCOTT. And so that's one way, but always be adding value. Don't just constantly tweet willy-nilly trying to get press, but rather be valuable to the people who already follow you. The second thing you can do, which you just mentioned, is if you know that particular reporters are right in your wheelhouse, right? They're writing about the thing that you are an expert in. Yes, you can tag that reporter on Twitter. I always recommend doing it in such a way that you're clearly following their work. So maybe they're a newspaper reporter in the city or the town you live in, and they just wrote a story about COVID-19, and they talked about the effect on the local economy. And if you're in the real estate business, perhaps they forgot about real estate. You could tweet them and say, hey, use their Twitter ID. Hey, John Smith, loved your story about the effect of COVID-19, hashtag COVID-19 on the hashtag Boston, I live in Boston economy, use the Boston Globe Twitter ID. But you might be interested to know that we've done some studies on what the effect on the real estate market is. You might want to check them out and then point to a blog post. So you're basically helping them to do a follow-on story to the one that they just wrote, which you're clearly saying that you just read.
Exactly, showing them the love. So I always say, make
Yes.
sure they know that you're, and I wanted to share, just as we're talking about this, Kate Rogers from MSNBC tweeted this when you talk about Twitter, but she said, finding the amount of PR pitches coming in that are not related to the stock market, economy, COVID-19, et cetera, really shocking, ... Still surprised every day. I mean this with as much kindness as possible. Please read the room.
Yes.
And that's so important. See what that media outlet is talking about. What have they
Right.
already covered? I had a great idea for one of the shows, and then I Googled it, and they had already done it. So
Right.
don't waste their time
No.
pitching your idea if they've done it. You've got to do that extra little bit of homework.
The other thing that's really interesting is that some outlets are actually putting out calls for experts. Way more so than they normally do. I saw one this morning from CNBC, and they specifically called out and said, looking for business people who have been affected by COVID-19 who are willing to talk. And that's rare that,
Right.
that a news outlet will put out, typically through Twitter, but sometimes through other means, put out a call for people to help them. And so being aware of what's happening is important. And, sometimes the old-fashioned way of doing a letter to the editor, or in some cases, some of the news outlets have ways that you can contribute video, like CNN, I think it's called the iReport. Is that right?
I believe so.
I think so. There's ways that certain media outlets encourage members of the public to submit video and submit text-based stories in the form of editorials. And many times in a crisis like this, there aren't as many well-crafted videos or articles that, byline articles that people write, because people don't naturally have that ability to think, oh, how can I write something that's interesting on this breaking news story? I've noticed that a lot of the letters to the editor in I live in Boston, the local paper, are about COVID-19, but I can't imagine the average person in the city of Boston waking up and say, oh, I'm going to write an editorial today about, a byline about the COVID-19 situation. So even the good old fashioned way that we used to do it 30 or 50 or 100 years ago might even work today.
Right. And as you mentioned, this is all that we see right now in the media. And if you Google Newsjacking and David Meerman Scott, you'll see his diagram. And, it's been breaking news, but it's still going to be hot news, but they've kind of come up with other stories.
Yes.
They can't just keep saying the same
Yes.
thing over and over again. And that's probably why CNN or CNBC, whoever you mentioned, is looking for real world stories, because they've got to fill 24/7.
Right. And what's happening now, what's typical of a news story like this, is initially it's just the facts. And this story is such an enormous story that it still is just the facts in a lot of the stories. So how many people have COVID-19? How many deaths have there been? What's happening in Italy? What's happening in China? What's happening in different American cities? San Francisco just did a lockdown. New York is I think either doing a lockdown or talking about did a lockdown. Those are the facts. But as soon as the facts are reported, then the news reporters shift to what does this mean and how can I add color to it? So in the Boston area, a couple of days ago, they closed all the restaurants and bars. Those are the facts. That's what comes out day 1 or day 2. In day 3 and day 4, it's what does this mean for restaurant workers? What does this mean for food supply companies? What does this mean for the shopping malls that have tenants who are restaurants? Are they going to be able to afford their rent next month? So we've just talked just in 3 seconds there. That's a food story, a worker's story, and a real estate story. And so any one of those things are stories that the reporters are working on. And I bet they're working on hundreds of other angles on the fact that was reported just a couple of days ago.
Right. So this is a huge opportunity, like I said, to share your message with such a big audience.
Yeah.
So, and the people who are jumping on this are seeing success.
Yes.
And to have that and to get your name out there, in the media, and this, it just gives you so much authority and credibility, and will do so much, because we are all going to bounce back from this.
Oh, yeah.
This is, our businesses are going to continue. We've got a big blip ahead of us, but we will be back. So take advantage of this, learn newsjacking, and listen. That's really important. Listen to what those media outlets are saying or writing, and how can you provide value.
And what's interesting, Christina, is your whole business is PR for anyone. And this is the moment in history for PR for anyone. This is our moment. Yes, you can do it anytime, but it's never been, I don't want to say easier because I don't want to trivialize it, but this is the moment that any one of us can have enormous media hits. We can transform our business in this time of crisis. I love the fact that you talk about PR for anyone, because that's the situation we're in right now, don't you think?
I do. And on that note, please try this. Provide your value, share it with journalists. David said this is the opportunity. Please check him out. He is amazing.
Okay. So that was a little bit dated. It was, during the COVID lockdown, but I would argue that many people spend a high percentage of their day on their screens, on their computer, on their phone. So it really doesn't change the mentality of trying to connect with people where they are. It's not like since the pandemic ended, those kinds of things have really changed that much. I would argue it's a very similar dynamic. You go into any office, those that still go to an office, everyone's sitting in front of a computer screen or in front of a phone. It's just reality, right? And the other thing that's happening in a big picture way is what many of us grew up with is what we consider mainstream media. Could be, newspapers, television, radio, all of that stuff. Think about how much it's changed just in the last 5 years. You know, many newspapers, particularly smaller local newspapers, are going out of business. Television, particularly network television, like NBC, CBS, ABC, seems to be a very small percentage of the population watch it on a regular basis. That a lot of young people do not look at network television at all, and they don't look at newspapers at all, as two examples. So the business model of hiring somebody to mention your business in the media, hiring a PR firm, for example, has really changed. It now is it's a different game. The game is more producing content relevant to what you're doing, what your business is, or your expertise, and then trying to connect journalists or others with your content. That's kind of the game. And the idea behind newsjacking, I'm gonna show you. This is also a little bit dated. This is from about a year ago, but it's I've got 8 examples of actual newsjacking that you can see. So let's take a quick look at that. Any comments? Anybody have anything they want to just throw out? Questions? Okay, let's try this. Okay, so this has 8 recent examples, but it's about a year old, but it'll still give you an idea. So it starts off, I'm not going to read all this to you, but there's a wax museum in London called Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. And when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were leaving London, they removed their statues from the museum, which was really an attempt to just get publicity for their museum. But let's just look a couple examples. So the first one they give here is the Google's year in search. And they're talking about 2020 in this case. But their point of doing this year in search is really to attract attention to Google's search engine. That's what it's about. So they create this video every year. It goes over the highlights of that year. This is a really good one. I don't know if you all remember this, but Peloton did a commercial where a wife is given a Peloton by her husband. And it was a very controversial ad from the point of view of sexism and all that kind of stuff. But, it was it ran on network TV, it ran everywhere, it ran on the web. And a lot of people had a really bad reaction to it. So a gin company, Aviation American Gin, which happens to be owned by Ryan Reynolds, which is, I guess, a famous actor, he went out and hired the woman that was the actress in the Peloton commercial. And we'll just watch this real quick because it's pretty funny. The previous one, basically, without going into details, this woman gets this Peloton for Christmas, and basically the husband's inferring, you're fat and out of shape and you better get on this bike. That's essentially the message. So here is the response by a gin company.
This gin is really smooth.
Yeah. We can get you another one if you like. You're safe here.
To new beginnings.
To new beginnings. There you go. It's gonna be a fun night. There you go. Take this too.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You look great, by the way.
So anyway, using a little humor, but they're trying to capitalize on the publicity generated by somebody who spent millions of dollars on their ad, and they did this for a much lower cost. This particular commercial ended up with over 7.5 million YouTube views and 55,000 retweets. So that's pretty good. Another one that they talk about is in Ireland. I guess they had a commercial about how Burger King, McDonald's were in this controversy about this idea. So Burger King came out with a menu that made fun of McDonald's, right? So they had like a Big Mac, but actually big. The burger the Big Mac wished it was, Big Mac-ish but flame grilled, anything but a Big Mac, kind of like a Big Mac but juicier and tastier. They basically leveraged the news about this trademark dispute, and it did really well with it. So let's see here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
How, like, I don't know. I have often given non-trivial thought to making a direct comparison between my product and a competitor's product because there's a major flavor difference.
Okay.
I cannot imagine the pushback, the blowback from a small business trying to pull off something like that and not alienate the living crap out of someone who is bigger. I'm right about that, right? I mean, like you wouldn't do that at this size, right? I mean, Coca-Cola can get away with it.
Well, I would argue you're making I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. I think you're focusing on the what are you delivering? If you do a really in your face, point by point academic kind of comparison, arguably they might get upset. But if you do something funny and something that makes the point without being, real super dogmatic and super detailed, I think you have an excellent chance of doing it, of making the case. And who's going to get mad at someone who does it with a little creativity and a little humor? You might have some customers, sitting at a table trying each one, right?
Exactly. And I've had that happen, and you should see the looks on their faces.
Well, there's your video.
Try some of it. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've just always been a little bit nervous about
Well, I wouldn't
being
be nervous.
so direct.
Well, that's why, one of the things, if you look at these, nobody's getting into any facts, right? Nobody is making factual statements or representations. They're trying to be funny, and they're telling a story, and they're doing it in a humorous way. So you might have some of your customers dress up in funny costumes or something, and try the drinks and compare them. And that way it doesn't even have to be any words at all. It can just be facial expressions, right?
There's that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. So it's more a matter of creativity than it is, anytime you get into factual and accusations or holding people's feet to the fire, they might have grounds for some sort of cease and desist or some sort of, they're not going to spend money trying to beat back a little small brand. But if you do it with humor, who knows? They might even promote it. You never know. I doubt it, but you never know, depending on how it's done. If it's funny enough, I've seen it before.
I appreciate
this one here. I hope that helps. The next one is really hysterical. So we know that, there's been a lot of discussion about immigration and where people are from, and Mexico in particular, has been held out as sending us all these bad people and et cetera. So this is Aeromexico, and their job was to get people to come from the U.S. Can you imagine having that job during all this? You are now going to be responsible for getting people from the U.S. to fly to Mexico, right? So this is how they approached it. I think you'll like it.
Mexico's first destination is America. But America's first destination is not Mexico. So, we went to a typical American town to ask why they don't consider Mexico an option to travel to.
Would you consider going to Mexico?
No way.
The idea of going to Mexico is not something that I would foresee.
That's not my cup of tea.
Let me stay here in peace and let those folks stay on their side of the border.
Do you like tequila?
Yes.
Do you like burritos?
Yeah.
Do you like Mexico?
No.
And when your company name is Aeromexico, well, so how do we increase USA flights to Mexico if a big part of Americans just don't like Mexico? According to the Department of Homeland Security, Mexican immigration goes as far as the 1800s settling in on the South, meaning that a big percentage of Mexican ascendants in the USA doesn't even know it yet. So we did a DNA test to prove it and turn those results into discounts. The more Mexican they are, the more discount they get.
Joshua, you are 18% Mexican.
Oh, wow.
So you get 18% off to fly to Mexico. Charlotte, you are 14.4% Mexican. You're 22% Mexican.
That's bullshit. That is bullshit.
You are 18% Mexican.
Well, that's better than you.
So you get 22% off to fly to Mexico.
Oh, come on now. Seriously? Okay. That's for real. So what if I want to take my wife?
Eligible for a 15% discount to go to Mexico. What do you think about that?
I love discounts.
Sorry, Betsy. You're only 3% Mexican.
So we kept giving discounts all over Southern America in our travel agencies. DNA discounts. There are no borders within us.
This channel is part of...
Anyway, I think you get the point. These are big budget operations, obviously running DNA tests and all that kind of stuff. But I think conceptually, if you look at how you get your news wherever you get it, think about how you could incorporate some of that. You know, like this whole Chinese balloon thing has so much potential for fun stuff. You know, I've seen some stuff on Facebook. People are posting their logo on the balloon and doing all this stuff. You know, that's kind of a real obvious one. Everyone's talking about it. You know, how do you maybe you write a blog post about it. You do a short video or something, or graphic. And then you see if, you know, anybody picks it up, any of the media picks it up. They might, you know, that's just one example. And I'm sure if you stop and think about it, you could also look in your particular product category where you know, where you operate. There's probably trade press or, you know, newsletters or blogs or whatever, Facebook groups, all that kind of stuff that, you know, you could do something like that. You could newsjack something that is of interest to that group. You know, I see a lot of stuff all the time about, you know, processing animals, you know, for meat, particularly hogs and cattle and stuff. That's always something controversial happening in that space, you know, where somebody filmed something or whatever. So those are examples of newsjacking. And I believe if you do it with a little bit of humor and a little bit of fun and creativity, people aren't going to get upset. Like if you know, drag them on the carpet and say, you know, you're killing innocent pigs or whatever, you know, all that does is cause people to respond negatively. And you don't want to be that. You want to sell your product or your service. So connecting to what people are talking about, whether it's a vertical, you know, an industry vertical or something you do specifically, you know, it just play around with it, practice it. It's something you'll learn how to do over time. You might even develop a kind of blueprint for how you do it, right? Like how your stuff looks, you know, or your spokesperson, or it could be you, or it could be a spokesperson. It could be, you know, some message like, you know, little slogan, a little tagline, something that you put on all your content so that it gets picked up by some of these other media places. So that's what newsjacking is all about. And it's a one of the more effective ways to broaden your reach from a cost perspective. There may be some costs associated with creating your content depending on how you do that. But other than that, you're not paying advertising rates or any of that kind of stuff. You're literally hijacking the news, newsjacking. That's essentially what it is. Any question? Okay. All right.
Hey, Dennis, it's Sarah.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Sorry, there's some background noise. Just quick question. Do you recommend or you ever use Harrow?
Never heard of it.
Help a reporter out. So it's a free service you can sign up for, help a reporter out, and you can sign up for different topics. And every day they send out requests for news from regular people. And it's a bit overwhelming, like it's hard to keep up with. So I was just wondering if anyone had figured out a system to work with Harrow.
Great question.
This isn't helpful, Sarah. I've signed up for it too, but it is overwhelming because I think they come out twice a day and then they break it down into different categories like business or entertainment and things like that. So you really got to take some time to kind of dig through it. I've submitted to a couple of them and gotten feedback, but it's kind of hard to manage.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten published through anything that you did with Harrow?
No, I didn't. What about you, Sarah?
HARROW, is that how you're saying it?
No, it's just HARO, like help a reporter out.
Okay. HARO. Okay. You know what? This would be a fun thing to ask the AI how to best use Harrow.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, they might have a little tool or give me a tool to manage Harrow. They might give you something. Okay, I'm looking at it now. No, it's the first time I've ever heard of it. I know the PR firm behind it, Sission, is well known, so that must be something that they're behind. But yeah, so they're trying to turn newsjacking into something they can make money on. They probably charge all these reporters to be part of it, I would assume. Yeah, subscription base for them. So yeah, thanks for that. That's great. I think what you'll find, depending, this is something you can kind of practice. You can start in your local area. You can reach most of the media in your particular city, town, county, region, however you look at it. That's not that hard to do. You can probably find their Twitter or their email, all that stuff. So I would start developing your own little list, of sources and start small, start local and build from there. And you can become known as an expert in your field for those people, and you might find yourself getting mentioned at some point. So I think focusing in your area is a good place to start, and then go from there. That would be my suggestion. All right. So that's all I have for today. I'm trying to keep track of all this. Let's just see what we got coming up. I did want to point out a couple things. March 1st, the class is going to be at 11 a.m. instead of 10 because of our guest speaker, who is one of the top CPG mergers and acquisition guys in the country. And he's wonderful. You'll really like him. You'll like his approach. His presentation is very lively and very practical for you guys. Tomorrow we're going to cover one of my favorite topics, which is emotional intelligence for entrepreneurs. How do you use those skills? How do you use emotional intelligence to manage not only yourself but any potential, whether it's employees, partners, suppliers, all that kind of stuff. So I think you'll find it enjoyable. And then Wednesday we're gonna talk about branding, and this guy is just on fire. I warn you, he talks faster than anyone I've ever heard in my life. So you'll probably have to watch the video like 4 times, but it's so good. He is so good and has done work for everyone you've ever heard of. He's done branding work for, and his message is just fantastic. And Thursday, we're going to talk about how to set goals and how to measure your progress against those goals. This is not about necessarily, personal life goals. It's managing your business, managing your opportunities, dealing with, how are you doing? Are you reaching your goals, or you just change your goals when you don't reach them, which is what I do all the time. Oh, didn't make that goal, but I'll make a new one here. So I think that will be helpful. And next week, just to highlight, next Wednesday, thanks to Sarah, we have Kevin. Am I pronouncing Goronsky? I'm probably not spelling it right or saying it right. But
Yeah,
Kevin
I don't know how to say it either.
Okay, Kevin is a Polish guy like me, so he can't pronounce his last name, but he actually helps brands get on Amazon and other digital media type things. And Sarah works with him, and that's how we met him. But he's going to be our guest speaker, and he's going to talk to you all about the things that they do as a company to help brands increase their sales by going on Amazon and other things that they do. So I think it'll be really exciting for everybody to get a good look at that. Also, if anybody has stuff that they want me to cover or stuff that's really burning of interest, just shoot me a message. And I have a really extensive library of content, and I try to pick what's relevant to the group. So if there's something you guys have that you're interested in, I'm certainly willing to take a look at that and see if I can help illuminate some things that you might be thinking about. So don't hesitate to reach out. All right. Well, thanks everybody. That's all I got for today. Okay.
Thanks.